Miracle African Tales. The Shadowed Altar. In the sprawling city of Abuja, amidst the chaos of politics, wealth, and religion, stood the grand citadel of Christ Dominion Church. The towering structure of glass and steel gleamed under the sun, a symbol of power, influence, and wealth. It was here that Pastor Michael Daniels once stood, a charismatic figure whose sermons could stir the hearts of thousands. His death, sudden and shrouded in mystery, left a void in the church and in the life of his wife, Evelyn Daniels. Evelyn had always been the perfect pastor's wife, graceful, humble, and supportive. But behind her composed facade lay a storm of bitterness and ambition. Losing Michael had been both a tragedy and an opportunity. She had mourned him publicly, wearing the black veil of grief with poise. But in the privacy of her opulent home in Maitama, her tears had been more for the loss of her status than her husband. Evelyn was beautiful in a way that defied her age. At 43, she could pass for 30, with her flawless caramel skin, almond-shaped eyes, and a smile that could disarm the most guarded hearts. Her beauty was her weapon, and she wielded it with precision. After Michael's death, she became the de facto leader of Christ Dominion Church, a position that fed her thirst for power. But Evelyn's rise was not ordained by God, it was a calculated journey paved with dark rituals and secrets. It began 6 months after Michael's death. Evelyn had been approached by a woman named Mama Esther, a spiritualist whose reputation was whispered about in elite circles. Mama Esther had an aura of mystery about her, with her flowing white robes and piercing eyes that seemed to see into the soul. She had attended Michael's burial, and a week later, she showed up uninvited at Evelyn's home. "I know your pain," Mama Esther had said, her voice smooth and hypnotic. "But I also see your potential. You were meant for greatness, Evelyn. Your husband was a good man, but he was holding you back. Now, it is your time." Evelyn had been skeptical at first, but Mama Esther's words ignited something in her, the hunger for more. More power. More influence. More control. It was Mama Esther who introduced her to the rituals, teaching her how to harness spiritual power through the energy of others. "The seed of power lies in the essence of man," Mama Esther had explained, handing Evelyn a pristine white handkerchief embroidered with golden threads. "But not just any man. You need the young, the strong, the virile. Their essence will fuel your rise, and the handkerchief will hold their destinies." Evelyn's first choice had been accidental. David, a 24-year-old choir member, was a strikingly handsome young man with a voice that could melt hearts. He had been grieving Michael's death, seeking solace in Evelyn's presence. One evening, after choir practice, Evelyn invited him to her office under the pretense of discussing church matters. David had been nervous, fidgeting with the hem of his shirt as Evelyn poured him a glass of wine. She was charming, empathetic, and disarmingly candid about her struggles as a widow. As the night deepened, the line between comfort and seduction blurred. When David left her office the next morning, he felt exhilarated but also strangely drained. Unbeknownst to him, Evelyn had performed the ritual that night. She had used the white handkerchief to collect his essence, chanting incantations under her breath. The next Sunday, David's performance during the service was lackluster. Over the following weeks, his energy waned, his finances crumbled, and his once promising future seemed to evaporate into thin air. Evelyn watched it all with a mix of guilt and satisfaction. Mama Esther had been right, the ritual worked. And David was only the beginning. By day, Evelyn was the picture of piety, delivering heartfelt speeches about faith and resilience. She organized charity events, counseled church members, and played the role of a grieving widow to perfection. By night, she was a predator, targeting the church's young men, ushers, instrumentalists, and even assistant pastors. Her methods were subtle yet effective. She used her charm, her position, and the allure of her beauty to ensnare her victims. Each encounter was followed by the same ritual, the white handkerchief absorbing their essence and, with it, their destinies. The men were left hollow, their lives unraveling as Evelyn's influence grew. Rumors began to spread, whispers of young men falling from grace after crossing paths with the pastor's wife. But no one dared to confront her. Evelyn was untouchable, her power rooted not just in the church but also in the corridors of political and social influence. As Evelyn's rituals continued, she began to change. The rituals took a toll on her soul, leaving her haunted by nightmares and shadows that seemed to follow her everywhere. She avoided mirrors, unable to face the darkness in her own eyes. Mama Esther's visits became more frequent, each one filled with cryptic warnings and demands for loyalty. "The power you seek comes at a cost," Mama Esther had said during one visit. "You must be prepared to sacrifice everything, even yourself." Evelyn dismissed the warning, blinded by her ambition. But deep down, she felt the weight of her choices. The church that had once been a sanctuary now felt like a prison, its walls closing in as the whispers grew louder. One Sunday, a new face appeared in the congregation, a young man named Nathaniel. He was unlike anyone Evelyn had ever met. Handsome yet humble, he radiated a quiet strength that intrigued her. He joined the church as a volunteer, quickly becoming a favorite among the members. But there was something about him that unsettled Evelyn. Nathaniel was kind but guarded, his piercing gaze seeming to see through her facade. Evelyn felt drawn to him, but for the first time, she hesitated. Something about him felt different, almost dangerous. As the weeks passed, Evelyn found herself obsessing over Nathaniel. She saw him as both a threat and a prize, a man whose essence could elevate her to unimaginable heights. But deep down, she sensed that he might be her undoing. Evelyn Daniels stood before her ornate mirror in the master bedroom of her Metoma mansion, her reflection shimmering in the dim light of the crystal chandelier. Her beauty, carefully preserved through nightly rituals and stolen destinies, stared back at her. Yet behind her almond eyes, there was something fractured, something hollow. Nathaniel. The name lingered in her mind like the echo of a haunting hymn. The young man had unsettled her from the moment he joined the church. Handsome, yes, but not in the naive, malleable way of her previous conquest. There was something unyielding in his presence, a strength that repelled her and drew her in equal measure. Evelyn couldn't ignore him. And that terrified her. Nathaniel had quickly become indispensable to the church. He was the epitome of humility, often volunteering to clean the pews after service or help elderly members with their groceries. His voice carried an untrained yet moving quality that resonated during choir practices. Members began flocking to him for advice, bypassing Evelyn entirely. It was as though Nathaniel was a quiet light in a world that had grown increasingly dim. Evelyn watched this shift with a simmering resentment masked by a carefully curated smile. She saw the way women in the congregation admired him, their giggles poorly concealed behind hymnals. She noted the way even the men seemed to respect him without question. His aura was magnetic, and Evelyn felt her authority slipping with every passing Sunday. On a humid Friday night, Evelyn summoned Nathaniel to her office under the pretense of discussing a new charity project. She wore a simple yet elegant cream-colored dress, her hair cascading over her shoulders. The scent of lavender filled the room, subtle but intoxicating. Nathaniel arrived promptly, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. "Pastor Evelyn," he greeted, his voice warm yet formal. "Please, Nathaniel, call me Evelyn," she said, motioning for him to sit. The conversation began innocuously enough: plans for a food drive, the allocation of funds, and strategies to engage the youth. But as the night wore on, Evelyn felt her composure slipping. Nathaniel's gaze never lingered too long, his responses measured and unyielding. It was as though he saw through her, past her facade of piety and grace. "Tell me, Nathaniel," Evelyn said, leaning forward, her voice soft yet probing. "What brought you to Christ Dominion Church?" Nathaniel hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "God brought me here," he said simply. "And what do you hope to find?" "The truth," he replied, his eyes locking with hers. Evelyn felt a chill crawl up her spine. Later that night, Evelyn sat alone in her bedroom, the white handkerchief clutched in her trembling hands. Mama Esther's words echoed in her mind, "Power demands sacrifice." Evelyn had sacrificed much. Her faith, her humanity, her very soul, all for the power that now consumed her. She thought of the young men whose lives she had taken piece by piece: David, the choir boy who now roamed the streets aimlessly; Samuel, the usher who had turned to alcohol after losing his job; and Peter, the assistant pastor who had disappeared entirely. Each face haunted her dreams, their hollow eyes a reminder of her sins. But Evelyn justified it all as necessary. After all, wasn't she building God's kingdom? Weren't the sacrifices worth it if they brought more souls to the church? 2 weeks later, during a late-night prayer meeting, Nathaniel approached Evelyn. The church was empty except for the two of them, the dim light casting long shadows across the marble floor. "Pastor Evelyn," he began, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "There's something I need to tell you." Evelyn's heart quickened. "What is it, Nathaniel?" He hesitated, as though weighing the gravity of his words. "This church, it's not what it seems. I've seen things, felt things, that aren't of God." Evelyn's smile faltered. "What are you implying?" Nathaniel stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I've been praying about this, and God revealed something to me. There's a darkness here, a spirit of manipulation and greed. And it's coming from the top." Evelyn's breath caught. "Are you accusing me of something?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. "No," Nathaniel said firmly. "But I believe there's something you're not telling us. Something you've been hiding." For a moment, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. Then Evelyn laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the empty church. "You think you know me, Nathaniel," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You think you can come here with your holier-than-thou attitude and judge me." Nathaniel didn't flinch. "I'm not judging you, Evelyn. But I can't ignore what God has shown me." That night, Evelyn had a dream. She was standing in the middle of the church, dressed in her finest gown. The congregation was gathered around her, their faces blank and expressionless. Suddenly, the ground beneath her began to crack, and she was swallowed by a darkness so profound it felt like drowning. When she woke, her chest was tight, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She reached for the white handkerchief on her nightstand, only to find it soaked with blood. Panicked, she called Mama Esther. "This is a warning," Mama Esther said, her voice grim. "Someone is interfering with the rituals. You must act quickly, or everything you've built will crumble." The next Sunday, Evelyn sat in her office, staring at the handkerchief. Nathaniel was a threat, she knew that now. But eliminating him wouldn't be as simple as it had been with the others. He was protected, not just by his faith but by something deeper, something she couldn't yet understand. She thought of confronting him, of using her charm to disarm him as she had with so many others. But the thought filled her with dread. For the first time, Evelyn felt powerless. As the service began, Evelyn stood on the pulpit, her eyes scanning the crowd for Nathaniel. When their eyes met, he smiled, a gentle, knowing smile that sent a shiver down her spine. "Brothers and sisters," Evelyn began, her voice steady but hollow. "Let us pray for guidance, for wisdom, and for the strength to face the challenges ahead." But as she spoke, she felt the weight of her own words, the hypocrisy of her existence pressing down on her like a suffocating fog. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn's control over the church began to wane. Attendance dwindled, donations dried up, and the whispers grew louder. Nathaniel's influence, though subtle, was undeniable. He began leading small prayer groups, his teachings focusing on repentance, humility, and the dangers of false prophets. Evelyn felt the walls closing in, her carefully constructed facade beginning to crumble. Mama Esther's warnings grew more urgent, her demands more extreme. "You must eliminate him," she said during one late-night call. "He's a threat to everything we've worked for." But Evelyn hesitated. For the first time, she felt the weight of her actions, the crushing guilt of the lives she had destroyed. And for the first time, she wondered if redemption was even possible. Evelyn Daniels woke to silence, the kind that presses on your chest and leaves you breathless. The luxurious drapes in her Metoma bedroom were drawn, but she didn't need light to know that everything around her was crumbling. The dreams were relentless now, faces of the men she had ruined, hollow and accusing. Her mind was a battlefield, the voices of guilt clashing with the whispers of Mama Esther's promises. For years, Evelyn had justified her actions. She believed that the power she wielded was ordained, a tool to build God's kingdom. But now, she saw the truth: she wasn't serving God. She was serving herself, and the cost was far greater than she had ever imagined. Evelyn's descent into darkness hadn't begun with malice. She had married Michael Daniels at 21, fresh out of university and filled with dreams of a life devoted to ministry. Michael was charismatic, a man whose sermons could move even the most hardened hearts. But beneath his public persona was a man consumed by ambition. Christ Dominion Church had started small, a rented space with barely 20 members. Evelyn and Michael poured their lives into it, fasting, praying, and working tirelessly. But as the church grew, so did Michael's hunger for influence. By their 10th year of marriage, the church had become a sprawling megachurch. Wealth poured in from tithes, offerings, and partnerships with wealthy politicians. But the pressure to maintain that growth was suffocating. Evelyn often found herself alone, sidelined by Michael's relentless pursuit of success. It was during one of those lonely nights that she met Mama Esther. Mama Esther had been introduced to Evelyn by a prominent senator's wife. The woman spoke of Mama Esther with reverence, describing her as a spiritual advisor with the power to unlock destinies. Evelyn had been skeptical at first, but desperation clouded her judgment. Michael was pulling away from her, consumed by his work. The church members adored him, but Evelyn was becoming invisible, her efforts overshadowed by her husband's charisma. She wanted to matter. She wanted to be seen. Mama Esther offered her that chance. "You have a light, Evelyn," Mama Esther had said during their first meeting. "But it's been dimmed by others. I can help you shine." What began as harmless prayers quickly escalated into rituals. Mama Esther introduced Evelyn to the white handkerchief, explaining its power to absorb and transfer destinies. At first, Evelyn had balked. But when she saw the changes, the growing respect from church members, the sudden influx of wealth, she was hooked. Michael never suspected a thing. He was too busy chasing his own ambitions to notice Evelyn's transformation. And when he died suddenly, his heart giving out during a sermon, Evelyn convinced herself it was God's will. Now, sitting in her office at the church, Evelyn stared at the white handkerchief on her desk. It had been weeks since her last ritual. Nathaniel's presence had made her hesitate, his words planting seeds of doubt that she couldn't ignore. That Sunday, Nathaniel delivered a testimony during the service. His voice was calm, but his words struck like thunder. "I once walked in darkness," he began, "thinking I was serving God but serving myself. I sought shortcuts to success, believing the end justified the means. But God showed me the truth. There are no shortcuts in His kingdom. What you build on lies will crumble." The congregation was silent, their attention riveted on Nathaniel. Evelyn felt the weight of his words like a dagger in her chest. After the service, Evelyn called Nathaniel into her office. Her hands trembled as she poured 2 glasses of water, avoiding his gaze. "What are you trying to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathaniel studied her, his expression unreadable. "The truth needs to come to light," he said simply. "You don't understand," Evelyn said, her voice breaking. "I didn't choose this life. It was thrust upon me." "Maybe you didn't choose how it started," Nathaniel replied. "But you chose every step after." Evelyn sank into her chair, tears streaming down her face. For the first time, she let the weight of her choices crush her. "I thought I was doing it for God," she whispered. "For the church. But I see now. I was doing it for myself." Nathaniel leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "It's not too late, Evelyn. You can still turn back. But you have to confess. You have to let go of the power you've clung to." The next Sunday, Evelyn stood before the congregation, her heart pounding. The church was packed, the air heavy with anticipation. "My brothers and sisters," she began, her voice trembling. "I have failed you." A murmur rippled through the crowd, but Evelyn pressed on. "For years, I've stood here as a symbol of faith, but my heart has been far from God. I allowed darkness to consume me, to use me. And in my selfishness, I have hurt many of you." The murmurs grew louder, shock and disbelief etched on every face. Evelyn looked at Nathaniel, who nodded encouragingly. "I cannot undo the harm I've caused," she continued, tears streaming down her face. "But I can repent. I can see God's mercy and strive to make amends. I only ask that you pray for me as I begin this journey." Evelyn's confession sent shockwaves through the church and the city. Many members left, unable to reconcile their faith with her revelations. The media descended like vultures, exposing every detail of her rituals and alliances with Mama Esther. Mama Esther disappeared, leaving Evelyn to face the consequences alone. The wealth she had amassed vanished as lawsuits and investigations drained her resources. But the greatest loss was her soul. Evelyn spent sleepless nights wrestling with her guilt, the faces of her victims haunting her every moment. Nathaniel stayed by her side, guiding her through the storm. "Redemption is a journey," he told her. "It won't be easy, but it's worth it." Evelyn's health began to deteriorate. The rituals had taken a toll on her body, leaving her frail and sickly. One evening, as she lay in bed, she whispered a prayer, a real prayer, free of ambition or deceit. "God," she said, her voice barely audible, "I don't deserve your mercy. But if there's still a part of me worth saving, take it. Use it for your glory." As she closed her eyes, a strange peace washed over her. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt free. A lot of people's eyes were open and realizing what the church was or what some churches have been about. The church was locked down for decades after she died, and they realized not everyone deserves to be called man or woman of God. What do you from the story? Thank you for always watching Mirok African Tales. Please subscribe and drop your comments and share as I bring to you another interesting story.